Hello, and welcome to codenamed Project Hellshift, a first-person shooter with roguelike survival elements. Now, in the previous video I uploaded about a month ago, I showcased some very early progress that have been made. And for those of you who know or don't know, this is the video I was talking about. It was a very early first test of the game, just trying out and seeing how it would work. Now, before even this video was uploaded, I also had like 10 other projects called Project Hellshift, but they all eventually died because I was really trying to figure out how to do this as best as I could. And this also includes the enemy damage effects, their health as well, and how it updates and interacts with the player damage. And this is all driven by gameplay effects and gameplay tags and gameplay events, etc. So this first early test was essentially structured with the gameplay ability system. But if we look at it today, in this video, it will look a bit different to what it used to look like, but it still has a lot of old references to the older mechanics I had in the game that was running. Now, the first thing I want to introduce in this very first devlog is how this architecture is set up and how I'm planning to combine everything to a smooth flowing game experience. So currently I have a metagame progression currently still in testing, so I haven't actually hooked it up to the main progression of the game. But the player skill progression, like the actual core loop, is kind of running and working. So what I'm planning to do is to actually add the metagame progression on top of it, so it gets to a playable state. What I'm going to show here right now is the save game system. So basically this is the metagame progression I was talking about. So if I delete the main save slot, what we'll get is within the player state. When we spawn, I have a very handy cheat called Cheat Give Weapons. And what it does is basically deposits currency to your player inventory. And that allows the player to purchase items. So we are going to purchase the shotgun, the rifle, and the pistol, the akimbo pistols. And after that, when we have purchased the weapons and told the save system we have enough currency, let's purchase them, we are going to also add the weapons by tag to the loadout component that is attached to the game state. And why I chose game state specifically is because I wanted to always live, even if the character is dead and destroyed, the player state or the game state, whichever states then decide to actually own the component, will live on in other levels as well, and will always hold the absolute truth of what you have bought from the PHS save subsystem. So that way, when you boot up a new game session, you play around, you kill a bunch of enemies, and you die, and then you reload to the save zone or hub area. Your loadout component should always have information of what you already purchased and owned, like those permanent upgrades, abilities, and unlocks. And that will be handy specifically for the inventory setup later on. So you'd have a shop, and that shop you can purchase items, and maybe you have also an inventory UI or user interface, and from there you can equip everything you have bought. So you can equip your weapon, and then you can equip modifiers to the weapon, like give me extra 10 damage. And then you have your character equipment, and you can say equip this roguelike card to my character and give me 100 health. And then lastly, in the cheat flow, we have the commit loadout to save. So basically, I'm going to run this once. And here we have stored currency 0, which is correct, and load save file. So what we have done is now, so the event triggers, and then we have deposited 300 currencies into the currency balance. And then from that, we bought 3 weapons, each of 100 currency of total value, so it amounts to 300. So now if I disconnect it, we should be able to already spawn with the weapons we have bought. Just like so. And the currency works in a different way as well. So when you do actually play the game and you want to earn more currency, say you're in a game session or like a single gameplay session, and you kill a bunch of enemies and then you complete a bunch of missions. So we're going to the currency volume and we'll add 300 currencies to the current game session. And then eventually when the player either dies or force quits the game, you go to the extraction volume here that replicates that effect. And here you have 450 in currency. Now, why it's higher than 300? It's because the extraction volume also accounts for the extraction event. If there ever is an extraction area where the player can actually leave the session rather than dying or force quitting the game. And that will also give the player more currency than what they initially had earned during the game session. Currently, the extraction is timed by 1.5x, so a multiplier. But going into the extraction volume, there's also a very handy boolean that you can say, we don't actually want to have an extraction. Let's just let the player play as long as they want. And eventually, when they die, they get the currency that they currently hold. And that specific code doesn't really have a multiplier yet, but it can be fixed eventually. Right now, if I press play again, and I have 450, and let's say I get 200 more in currency, so now it should be 650, which is correct, and we don't have any multiplier attached to the player. Now for the save zone and combat, it's more of like if you're in a single gameplay session where you're fighting enemies, or are you in the hub area in a safe zone where you don't really want the player to use the guns yet. And what this does, basically, if you go into the combat, it attaches the weapon index, and it's based on the weapon purchases. So since we purchased the first weapon as shotgun, basically load weapon index 0, which is the shotgun, and then the second one is the rifle, another variation of the shotgun, and then the akimbos, which is also another variation of the shotgun, but it represents double magnums. And then going into the save zone, unequips all weapons the character has equipped, just like so. And of course, everything here is still a very work in progress. So nothing of this current explanation of how these work are currently hooked up to the player skill progression, like the core loop of the game. This is more of the metagame progression that I'm working on, and eventually in the future I'll be able to hook all this up to have a nice flow. I also have some data assets I could show for how the weapon essentially works. Here we have a data asset of the type data asset weapon shotgun, and it has a identification of weapon tag weapon shotgun, and this allows the loadout component to know which weapon to add and remove. It also has a category tag by weapon category firearm and spreader. This is specifically for the weapon modifier. So if we equip a modifier to a weapon, that modifier may not be compatible or may be compatible with the weapon depending on the structure setup later on. I'm having it so I can literally have the modifiers be applied to weapons without me doing a lot of hard coding. So this modifier would have like the firearm tag, and that will fit into all possible weapons that have the firearm tag. But let's say this tag specifically is removed and replaced with the akimbo. Now only the akimbo or the double magnums would support this modifier. So the shotgun cannot equip the flat damage modifier, and the rifle cannot apply this flat damage modifier. This just allows me to design modifiers that would fit different weapons a lot better. because maybe you have like a modifier for the shotgun that you apply, and then that modifier is basically reducing the shotgun spread. You probably don't want the same modifier to be applied to the Magnum or the rifle or even a sniper, because their spread will probably look a lot different. And then maybe you'll have a child tag for the spreader, and then you can specify this is specifically for the rifle, sniper, and Magnum, etc. And the loadout component will know that and will not attack them unless they are supported. For the progression field, it's more of the roguelike elements where you can stack these modifiers. So the max stacks means essentially that you can only stack 4 of these same modifiers, and any more than that is not allowed. You can also define if this modifier will be allowing infinite stacking or not, which can be handy for very generic modifiers or cards. Maybe you have like a modifier that increases weapon damage by 10 and it supports all kinds of weapons. That could be pretty handy to have, especially in a game session where you are constantly leveling up and shooting. That can be very handy to always choose and not worry about. And for the effects, here you can choose the gameplay effect to apply for the specific weapon. Now, it doesn't really apply to the weapon itself, it just applies to the character game attributes, which the character actually owns. And the UI is more like user interface visuals. We can apply display names and description and also an icon. And also the cost per stack, how much would this cost if it was available in a shop. And the same applies for the card data assets. It's basically the same structure, but it's 2 different things. The modifier applies effects for your weapons, and then the cards apply effects for your character. So the cards could be like plus 100 health or plus 100 shield, while the modifier makes the weapon essentially a bit better to use. I also have a placeholder data table that I used in my previous video where I showcased the roguelike element of like when you level up and then you get to choose which cards to pick, and then based on the chosen card it will apply different effects to the player. And this will eventually also be combined with the new setup I have going on with the new data assets and the loadout inventory. But for now, this is isolated into its own thing and it doesn't support the new setup. So I'm hoping eventually to also add that support if possible, or completely remake it into something better. Now for the level up volume, it uses the data assets, not the data table that I just showed. And it applies these effects to the character and to the weapon. So you can think of this more like as a shop/vendor where you buy things and equip it to the weapon, but this does it automatically for you, so you don't have to think too much about it. And when we go through, you can see the gameplay effect of damage increasing by 50 and the health attribute for the character increasing by 100. Now, if I shoot a enemy, it essentially one-shots them. Let's say I didn't equip anything yet. So what I'll do, I'll equip the shotgun and shoot the enemy, and I'll do the flat damage, like the base damage the shotgun has, which is 50 damage. But again, when leveling up, you can one-shot the enemies because their current health is set to 100, and you're doing 100 damage per shot currently. And the same thing applies to the other weapons as well. So this one does, I believe, 25 damage, and now it does 75 damage. So now you can two-shot enemies with them. Else by default, you do 25 damage per shot, which takes a lot longer to kill the enemies. And that's the idea of applying the metagame progression of permanent upgrades, where you can make your character stronger and your weapon stronger before going into a new game session. Now for the player abilities, I haven't done too much with it, except a bunny hopping mechanic and a dash mechanic, but I'm eventually planning to add more functionality, more abilities when the time comes for it, as well as possibly the idea of allowing abilities to be equipped when leveling up. So when leveling up instead of upgrading a card or modifier like your weapon attributes or your character attributes, you can upgrade the ability itself. Like maybe you can jump higher, or maybe you can dash faster or longer eventually, or the ability to actually add new abilities for the character. So let's say you have equipped the Akimbo Magnum, and then you get to choose a new ability. And that ability maybe allows the Akimbo Magnum to shoot out lasers instead of regular bullets, or maybe it fires fire bullets or something cooler than that. Or the possibility of adding cool new abilities altogether. So instead of choosing the card, you choose the ability, and then it gives you anti-gravity or the ability to cast spell or something cool that will fit a new ability to choose rather than a card. But that's just currently just a concept, but the support for it does kind of exist. It's just how to layer it into the existing system would be the hardest point to figure out. So for the existing abilities, we have the bunny hopping, which allows you to continuously jump while holding space. So if you just press space, you do a regular jump, but if you hold space and keep strafing, you can see at the top left your character's speed increases the more or the better you strafe. And the current speed it has, I believe, is like 1,800 or 1,900. So there is a max limit to it, but that is easily adjustable or even possible to add into the upgrade system itself. We also have the dashing, where you can dash in any direction you want. This is quite useful later on when you need to avoid certain enemies. So maybe you have like an enemy that can shoot pretty accurately. You'd probably want to avoid that as much as possible. And the dashing has also a bit more functionality to it. You can dash, but you can also look into the air and dash again, so giving you the possibility of a double dash rather than a single dash. This only works one time, so you can only ever dash in the air a single time, a small limitation of the ability itself. Now, going into this level, we're going to hypothetically test how the loop works. This level lacks a lot of blockouts and the new metrics that I've currently designed, so it's not up to date. It just has like a few assets to play with, and this kinda defines the boundaries of what to play within. This is a sandbox just for me to test out and play out and see how it is. I also have very basic spawners that continuously spawn enemies the more you play. So every 5 to 20 seconds it will spawn an enemy, and it will keep spawning enemies until it reaches like a max cap of 300 enemies in total, which is kind of nice and chaotic at the same time. But for now, let's try to play. And at the bottom left you have your level attribute, and when you kill an enemy and you pick up an orb they drop, you get XP from it, and when the threshold reaches max, then you can level up and choose one of the upgrades available. So now that we've leveled up, we have paused the game and we have shown the level up upgrade user interface. And from here, it chooses the data table, not the data assets, since that hasn't been implemented yet. This is still referencing the old system I've made. Eventually, I'll also add the support for the new data assets and the loadout system into this upgrade system. Currently, we're dividing them into rarities. So we have the rare, uncommon, and legendary. These are very generic test cards or test upgrades. We have the title, the rarity, the color for it, and also the glow effect for it when hovering over. We also have the image and also the description for it, and how many times you could eventually stack up this card. What I'd like to choose is the minor health upgrade to see something a bit visually on your health bar. So now we see we've increased our health by 50. So let's try to level up again and increase our damage, because we're doing too little to these enemies. And here we have the damage upgrade. So we're increasing our damage by 50. Now I should be able to one-shot all existing enemies. And this guy will drop a health orb. And now we can have 150 HP, and the UI also updates with it. And the large health upgrade is similar to the data asset I showed earlier in the metrics level. So choosing this will increase our max health attribute by 100. So we'll have 250 as our new max HP. So killing another red guy should essentially refill this bar for us. And so the more you play, the harder the enemies get by color indications. And they take incredibly more bullets to kill, or better said, more damage to kill. So these ones are not one shot anymore because their HP is much more than the green ones. And this continues on now forever until the player eventually dies, or when the player eventually force quits the game. Now the data table I showcased in the test level that gave us the plus 100 damage, the health, and the restore health options with their rarities and colors actually uses a level up manager. And this one is not persistent. It gets destroyed when the level resets or when the player dies. So these upgrades are never permanent. It's not attached to the metagame progression. And it shouldn't be, because this is just an addition to when you actually play the game, while the metagame progression is just the permanent upgrades, as I said before, that adds underneath these extra upgrades from this data table. Thanks for watching the first ever devlog. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I plan to hopefully make more devlog videos depending on how much progress I make and how much time I have to make these videos, because there's a lot going into it. So the plan to going forward after this video is trying to bridge all the system together and make the gameplay flow a lot better, as well as creating new Blender animations, assets, etc. for the weapons to play with. Because currently we only have the shotgun to play with, and then we just have variations of the same weapon, just reusing the shotgun asset itself. So for the future, you'll probably see more weapon variations with their own identity. So the rifle acts like a rifle, and then you have the akimbo weapons acting as the akimbo weapons, and so forward. So they're a bit more fun to play with, as well as all the things I mentioned earlier in the video, and the enemy variations. I probably believe that would be the last thing to touch up on, since because they currently only have different colors to differentiate themselves with. So I plan to make more variations of enemies that use different attack patterns, as well as create more visuals for the enemies themselves, so they look a bit more scary and threatening for the player, like a possible threat. But yes, as I said, it's probably going to be the last thing I touch up on, because it's such a big list. But for now, this is what I've been up to for the past month since the last video, and I hope you enjoyed the progress so far. And feedback is always appreciated. I'll see you again possibly in the next devlog, so stay tuned.